water.
We can feed him anything.
What a beautiful young girl. Today, we don't want just your money.
Let go of me! Let go of me! Stop it!
General Bai Li and I are good friends. If you don't mind my humble little abode, why don't you stay with my family and I for a while?
All right.
Good. Then let's go.
Fei, you can't go. The plague's infectious. However strong you are, you could die from the plague at any time.
月圆风般吹散沉香，香满青烟上。抓一味当归入药汤，相思泪。
Kwa hakika ule uamuzi niliochukua kumhusu Badi ulikuwa wa makosa. Najutia kusema la kweli. Haukuwa uamuzi wa busara kabisa.
Tulimalizana mimi na wewe. Sawa. Na sijui kwa nini nifuata hapa.
Nataka kukushukuru kwa kunirudishia sauti yangu.
Ni vizuri mtu kuchukua muda na kufikiria mambo kwa makini.
Wewe, nilikuleta hapa kuja kufanya nini?
Yaani ya maneno ya kujirudia rudia. What type of nonsense is this?
The excitement of the Olympic Games doesn't just stop there, as the biggest para-sports event, the 2020 Paralympic Games, gets underway from the 24th of August to the 5th of September in Tokyo, Japan. So, get ready to be inspired by these sportsmen and women with outstanding abilities, and look out for Team Kenya too in their quest for glory by watching all the highlights daily on KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner.
Hakika ule uamuzi niliochukua kumhusu Badi ulikuwa wa makosa. Najutia kusema la kweli. Haukuwa uamuzi wa busara kabisa.
Tulimalizana mimi na wewe. Sawa. Na sijui kwa nini nifuata hapa.
Nataka kukushukuru kwa kunirudishia sauti yangu.
Ni vizuri mtu kuchukua muda na kufikiria mambo kwa makini.
Wewe, nilikuleta hapa kuja kufanya nini?
Yaani ya maneno ya kujirudia rudia. What type of nonsense is this?
De una forma diferente, de otro modo.
I used to give my support to Madame Lucrezia because she's the mother of Lucio. Now I know that Lucio is very lucky to have you.
But hey, at least all your land is mine now. Let's talk to my lawyer and finish this.
No, not so fast. You're going to have to get Max out of jail, and then I will give you my land.
You always think about others before yourself. And I'm really sorry, but I really think that Mr. Mauro is already dead. It's been weeks since he disappeared.
Why are you here in the office of my father?
I am the president of this company now. Did you forget that?
I've decided to give Cesar the Star Zone in exchange for your freedom. You're gonna get out of here soon, Max.
Quiero amarte, adorarte y idolatrarte. De una forma diferente, de otro modo, nunca igual al de otra gente. Respetando tus...
月圆风般吹散沉香，香满青烟上。
Have some water.
To you!
Humble slave, how dare you give him water? Without my permission, nobody can feed him anything.
What a beautiful young girl. Today, we don't want just your money.
Let go of me! Let go of me! Stop it!
General Bai Li and I are good friends. If you don't mind my humble little abode, why don't you stay with my family and I for a while?
Alright.
Good. Then let's go.
Faye, you can't go. The plague's infectious. However strong you are, you could die from the plague at any time.
月圆风淡吹散沉香，香满青烟上。这一味当归入药汤，相思泪水。
The excitement of the Olympic Games doesn't just stop there, as the biggest para-sports event, the 2020 Paralympic Games, gets underway from the 24th of August to the 5th of September in Tokyo, Japan. So, get ready to be inspired by these sportsmen and women with outstanding abilities, and look out for Team Kenya too in their quest for glory by watching all the highlights daily on KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner.
Wesonga hai Good morning and welcome to KBC Newscheck on this 24th day of August 2021. Hope you're having a fruitful morning, and it's time to look at issues that are affecting the country, and especially when it comes to leadership. Of course, on Friday, the Court of Appeal did make a landmark judgment on the BBI, declaring it not as popular as it should be to go to the referendum. A 7-judge bench led by presiding judge and president of the Court of Appeal, Mr. Musinga, did declare the BBI initiative, amendment constitutional initiative, null and void. But they did use a lot of jargons, and of course the legal minds were there, and we've been able to bring them right here so that we may understand better what exactly the judges said, and also what options are there, both legally and politically. And I'm joined by experts on this morning. On my immediate right, we have Edmund Wesonga, who is an advocate of the High Court. On my immediate left, we have Churchill Saoke, who is a governance and leadership expert and also a lecturer at the JKU Art. And of course, you're also a doctor, right? Yes. And of course, he will be helping us delve into matters leadership and what it means when it comes to politics in the country. And on my extreme left, we have Topua Lesinko, who is also an advocate of the High Court. And of course, we are also armed with the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya right here, so that we may be able to make things even easier. Gentlemen, karibuni sana. Asante. And perhaps I will start with you, Topua. The decision, the landmark decision. Of course, a lot of people did expect that perhaps the BBI reggae will not be stopped, but the Court of Appeal did say that reggae will have to stop, at least a bit for this time. And of course, others have talked about let's forget the whole thing and let's focus on other things. But looking at the judgment, a lot of Kenyans also have hailed it as quite something for the Republic of Kenya.
Let me first begin by saying that the Court of Appeal actually confirmed our expectation. We started this journey at the High Court, and the holding of the High Court was very solid, and we didn't expect the Court of Appeal to deviate from that. And what they've just done is actually confirming that indeed the people are the sovereign. What we were contesting, or the main issues were that whether a public servant or those in governance position can initiate fundamental changes to the constitution, or that is a precept of the people. I think the Court of Appeal did not err. It just confirmed what the people of Kenya promulgated on 27th August 2010 by promulgating this beautiful document called the Constitution of Kenya 2010. So I think the people are the winners, and the Court of Appeal have just done the obvious. It's a decision that has been lauded all over the world as historic. It's trending, be it in countries like even in the Middle East, like Israel, the United States, the United Kingdom, and it has again repositioned Kenya on the map in Africa as a leader in matters law and also governance.
Indeed. Churchill, others have talked about the decision being actually a show of judicial independence and a win for the Constitution.
Well, I think we have to admit that the decision is actually a show of independence of the judiciary. Because you see there were speculations initially that there were possibilities that the decision could be influenced in view of the powers that be. But then when you look at how the decision was brought about, and specifically how they have brought extremely philosophical legal issues that have actually sort of redefined even future legal issues around constitutional amendments. It is something that we really have to be proud of as a country, because I think when you look at the areas that they had brought about, even the basic structures, the doctrine of the basic structures, I think these are things that many people, even the promoters of the constitutional amendment, did not expect. The idea of strengthening and bringing out a strong voice and a strong component of the constituent power and even the constituent assembly. These are things that many of the promoters did not expect, and it is now coming out that they are very key components of constitutional amendment today and even in the future.
Of course, Mr. Wesonga, you are also following that keenly, that decision, and what can you make of the Court of Appeal judgment on Friday?
I think I agree with my friend Topwa that this was expected because the High Court had made very fundamental findings about the proposed changes to the Constitution, and there were so many errors or mistakes that the court identified, and it was expected by many advocates and many Kenyans that probably it wouldn't go, the Court of Appeal would not annul everything that the High Court had found, because there were several errors that were committed by the proponents of the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2020. For instance, if you look at what the bill proposed, they were bringing about over 70 issues. And if you keenly look at each one of those issues, you will realize that one way or the other it doesn't comply with the existing provisions of the law. So this was expected, and I agree that it's a landmark decision. For those who may want to go to the Supreme Court to find other alternative interpretation on the issues, I believe there will still be more issues that the court, even the Supreme Court, will find that there are errors or problems with the proposal by the proponents of BBI.
Indeed. And Dr. Churchill, looking at the decision, and of course the High Court did declare that the President is the one who initiated the process which they declared null and void, and looking at the government, we have so many people who could have advised the President, the AG included. Can we actually shift the blame to the handlers of the President? Because looking at 5-judge bench and another 7 judges declaring the process as null and void, and some of the things that they were talking about, they are something that could have already been done earlier than like the quorum for the IEBC. Can we shift the blame to the handlers of the president? Because if they actually are supposed to advise him, and they advised him wrongly, and it was declared null and void by the High Court and also by the Court of Appeal.
Well, I think it will, on one part it will be, the other part will be that, you know, when you look at the circumstances under which some of these processes were started, they were hugely political issues. And I think there was too much focus on the political aspect of the process than on the legality of the process. And, you know, there was an aspect of the end sort of rather than the means. So the issues around the means were not looked at in detail. And to the extent that, and I'm sure that there were some, you know, there were some senior counsels in this country that also raised issues around some of these processes at the time when it was being done. But because of the key focus on the political aspect of the process, I think the legality and the process in itself took a backstage. And so this decision actually has therefore made even the initiators of the process to know that, you know, we need to, in as much as we might have a political end, we need to institutionalize, you know, the question of what we call in public law establishment of political power, institutionalization of public power, and exercise of public power. I mean, these are key components of public law that I think the proponents of this process did not look at. The key focus on the politics was too much than the process itself. Yeah.
Topua, do you concur with Churchill that, of course, it was more on the political side than looking at the legal aspect of the whole process?
Completely, I think I agree with him, because you'll find that some of the issues that are actually raised by the petitioners before the High Court were that, for example, the legal framework mandating how a referendum should be conducted, referendum law was still a bill pending in Parliament. But let me say that the process was found wanting both on the substance and the process, such that either way it will have failed, even if the whole, as in the process was, the fair process was followed, that is the due process, that public participation was conducted, it will have still failed on the substantive aspect of it. And I think that the Attorney General has also been a very weak link in the whole chain of administration, because on matters legal, is a legal advisor to the government, the legal advisor to the president. I think he should have really interrogated the bill to show that, well, we must have an ordinary citizen, for example, as the promoter. And you remember that he actually gave an advisory opinion on the legality of the whole process, and even Parliament. The process was actually challenged in Parliament, and you'll remember that Senior Counsel James Orengo actually challenged the process, the whole issue of BBI, for example, the issues of constituencies. And therefore I think the AG really failed in terms of advising the government on some of the key aspects of how the whole process was to roll out. And I think it's a very great disappointment, because huge taxpayers' money have been expended on the process, and ultimately the process has been unlearned. And I think it's also sad that it was undertaken at a time that we've not yet implemented our constitution fully. You remember that the former Chief Justice Emeritus David Maraga actually advised the president that dissolve Parliament, because there's still a very fundamental aspect of the constitution on the two-third gender rule that was not implemented. And I think the main thing that we should have actually done is try and implement the constitution, because all over the world scholars agree that a constitution has an average life of 19 years, and our constitution is barely 10 years old. I think the president, based on the oath of office that he undertook, it was for him to uphold and protect the current constitution, and not like to participate in activities that dismember the current constitution. So for me, I think we can neither argue that it was a bad timing or a bad timing to amend the constitution now, but I think we should have, for example, implemented some of the key aspects, like the judiciary fund is still yet not implemented, the two-third gender rule, and then we can come and sit around the table
Councillor Wesonga, gaping holes, looking at the judgment, the High Court decision, and looking at the Court of Appeal decision, gaping holes, including the referendum bill pending in Parliament, and of course the proponents of the BBI were actually we almost had a referendum, but there were so many challenges. Are you telling me that, including the AG, nobody saw this coming?
I think, for me, I want to agree on the abortion blame where it's due. Number one, I'll abortion blame to the presidential handlers, especially legal team, and also the Attorney General, as my learned friend has said. There are some fundamental aspects that any advocate or any lawyer, when faced with them, would be able to advise that this does not accord with particular provisions of the law. For instance, even before we got there, the vacancy in the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission fell way back, I think, in 2018.
Yes.
There are no, and the provision of the law provides that whenever a vacancy occurs, the president is supposed to declare it within 7 days. So since 2018 up to 2021, the president had not declared vacancies in those positions. 4 commissioners had left. It is only in 2021, around May or thereabout, that's when he declared vacancy. So if the president had been correctly advised to follow the law, to then declare vacant and fill the positions, I don't think some of the findings of the court, like IBC was not properly, constituted, would not be really falling against them. So this is a case where laws is actually left to fall where it's due. And in this case, it falls at the president's back. Then when you look at, again, some institutions like Parliament, there are 2 actual referendum bills pending before Parliament, and these issues have been going on since 2013, since 2014. Remember, there have been, I think, 22 attempts to amend the constitution. We remember Okoa. Was it Okoa Jahazi or Okoa Kenya? Yes, Okoa Kenya. You also remember the Third Way Alliance attempt, that is Punguza Mzigo. We now have the BBI. All these things, people are simply trying to put the cart in front of the horse before they make the law that would enable, for instance, how these amendments will be effectively carried out. You look at, for instance, the report, I think, that was released by IBC when they were verifying these signatures for this BBI. They were saying, the operative word, what we are supposed to do is just verification of signatures. Then one poses a question. Actually, IBC itself asked itself, what then is verification? That ought to have been provided by the Act of Parliament, stating this is what you need to do in order to ensure that the proposal meets the constitutional threshold. But then parliamentarians are running around trying to popularize the so-called BBI amendments, but they forget that they had a fundamental role to play to ensure that the process goes through. So I actually agree that the legal team failed the president. The Attorney General did not properly advise the president, or perhaps the political aspect took center stage as compared to legal processes.
Indeed, and Churchill, looking at the 2 ways that we can amend the Constitution according to Article 256, the Parliament 257 has failed, that is the popular initiative. What options does the BBI have? If it decides, the proponents decide, we are going to amend the Constitution through Parliament.
Well, of course, now the provisions of the law, there are specific aspects of the Constitution that can be changed by parliamentary route. Others are specifically must go through referendum. Like, when you're looking at key structures of the Constitution that touches on the executive territory of Kenya, the sovereignty of the people, those are things that you cannot change by parliamentary.
The basic structure doctrine that they kept mentioning the whole day.
Exactly. So those are things that you cannot change by parliamentary route. They have to go through the referendum. And of course, now the issues around the referendum also now have been keenly redefined, not really redefined, but concretely defined by the law, by the courts, where the 4 stages has to be undertaken. Civic education, public participation, a collection of views, and constituency debate and constituent debate and a referendum. So it means that if even in future, for any referendum, those key things, any person who is promoting must adhere to some of those issues. But of course, the parliamentary route, of course, I've already seen a few parliamentarians and even the county COG have decided on certain aspects so that they want to promote through parliament. Yes. But I am sure that when you look at the promoters of the BBI, there are certain aspects of the constitution that they were very keen on, which had a political implication, specifically in the structure of the executive. So, meaning that, the positions that needed to be distributed, those are things that cannot be changed by the parliament. They could maybe, the issues around ministers being part of parliament, maybe those ones they can work around. The aspects of distribution of revenue into the counties, maybe. So, when I look at it, the key things that they would have gotten from the BBI bill that would have had huge political gains, especially looking at 2022, they have been stopped a little bit. So they really have to sit back and rethink of how do they factor in some of these parliamentary constitutional amendments to fit their political interest in 2022. Yeah.
Topua, what can the proponents of the BBI do to actualize their constitutional amendment via Article 256, that is the parliament, and avoid all these loopholes that were mentioned at the High Court and at the Court of Appeal?
Indeed, what I can say is first of all that amendment of the constitution is a political process. More than actually a legal process, but you have the political process going its way, but the legal process, including even stakeholders like the Law Society of Kenya, actually keeps it in check to ensure that everything is streamlined according to the law. The Constitution has delineated what can be amended via Article 256 and what can be implemented through Article 257. And actually, Article 257 main target is those fundamental structures under Article 255. For example, issues of independence of the judiciary that cannot at all be implemented or amended through the parliamentary initiative. So what the Constitution envisage as what members of parliament can amend are those features that are not so fundamental to the Constitution and to the people, as the Constitution is actually the people's document. For example, Parliament cannot touch, for example, the 2 terms limit of the president. So I will still say that, as in, and what my colleague Churchill has said is that BBI was actually used, or rather document to achieve political process more than actually, as in some of the things, like for example, constituencies were just sweeteners to the deal. But the main back was actually a political milestone, for example, an expanded executive. And so there is no 2 ways about it. It's just actually just going back to the drawing board and seeing where were the pitfalls and see whether this document can again rebound, but must be generated at the bottom level by the ordinary mwananchi. I'm sure, as in, if subjected to the 4 sequence as was held by the High Court and the Court of Appeal judges, you remember that 4 sequence of actually collation of public views, public participation, Constituent Assembly was actually declared way back in 2004 by Justice Ringera in the case of Republic vs. Timothy Njue. So that case actually provided a foundation of how what now we call those aspects of the basic structure must be brought to law. So it must follow that 4 sequence process. So for me, I think there is no much gain in terms of what Parliament can do. In fact, I think what Parliament can do, for example, is increase the county allocation from the minimum, which actually the Constitution provides the minimum and doesn't cap the maximum. So they can easily, for example, cap that to maybe 35, That is what actually one of the things that the BBI sought to do, or even introduce a tax holiday for the youths.
Yes.
Those parliament have an explicit power to do, and you've actually seen that there was some relief that was given to Japanese employees in Kenya with regard to their tax obligations. So there is nothing in the constitution that prevents actually the parliament to also do that for the ordinary Kenyans. But I could say that the only route to implement most of the changes that were proposed in the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2020, that is the BBI document, is still the popular initiative. And there is much less that the parliamentary process under Article 256 can do.
Perhaps you want to dig in that. And still on the same, IBC is also one of the parties that was heavily criticized by both the High Court and the Court of Appeal, talking about the quorum, which, as you put it rightly, more than 3 years ago. And that is something that they could have just have done before then. And can somebody go to the courts and challenge each and everything that IBC has been doing since, of course, the commission has left? Because the Court of Appeal and the High Court did declare that it was not well constituted. And that would include, actually, the elections where the president of the Court of Appeal, Justice Musinga, was elected. IBC did conduct those interviews. Can somebody challenge? Is there a loophole there?
Before I get to that question, I respond to that question, I want to put something, just to add on what Topwa has said. The BBI proposals to amend the constitution were largely political. They were aimed to ensure we create 1, 2, 3 things to make a coalition for the purpose of probably 2022 elections. Now here, the interest was not about common mwananchi, you and I. It was about the political class. And the things that they were intending is to expand the executive. So that one has been taken away. There is no way these people will again go back and say those things that were really good, that are good for Mwananchi, let's go and do it through parliamentary initiative. Why? Because that was not their interest. If you, for instance, talk about the county resources, no, and in fact, you don't need any law to allocate that 5% to the counties. Why? Because the constitution gives the minimum. The sky is the limit. You simply look at how much have we collected as revenues, then you allocate to the counties. So you can do without a referendum, you can do without getting any act to provide that one. Then number two, looking at some of the tax reliefs and help issues to help students, you look at youth, whatever they were providing, those things can be done through an act of parliament. They were just added there to, as Topwa said, they were just softeners to entice what I would call group of voters. And so you realize, given that the court has stopped the key or rather fundamental desire of the political class, they may not be able to follow up with these other things that will really benefit Mwananchi. Now, coming back to the question you posed, can someone go then to court and challenge all the previous acts that IBC has done, given that the court has said that it does not have the quorum? That's an issue of interpretation. I say so because looking at the order that the Court of Appeal gave, the Court of Appeal said IBC is not properly constituted to undertake
a referendum.
No. The activities relating to BBI proposal to amend the constitution, meaning that order limits IBC to the process of amendment of the constitution that is brought by BBI bill, or rather Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020. When you look at the other order, I think the Court of Appeal and even the High Court gave was a permanent injunction. And the injunction is to stop IBC from undertaking any activity or processes that would ensure, or rather that would have to bring to fruition the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020. So looking at that, the wording of that order, one may be allowed to think, and I saw say that one only applies to the BBI amendment process. But again, there is another school of thought. Those who will say, for any policy issue which IBC undertook without a proper quorum should be quashed because it was undertaken without proper quorum and it is illegal to that extent. I think that is an issue then that requires or that merits interpretation by the apex court, the Supreme Court, so that we know, does this order then also apply to the policy issues IBC has been doing since 2018, so that it will be very disastrous if that's the position, because there are so many other issues, including by-elections that are, and we've had several by-elections, meaning that some people were not properly elected just because of the quorum issue. And of course, that's some issue that requires a broad interpretation. My position is that given the order that was given by the Court of Appeal, I think that one may limit only to the BBI proposals.
Indeed. Dr. Churchill, looking at, still on IEBC, did they fly too close to the sun? Looking at what the High Court and the Court of Appeal talked about, they've already done the signature verification, and they have not even commenced the continuous, actually they said continuous voter registration exercise.
I think the whichever the case, in as much as the decision was not necessarily binding on the policy issues for the IBC, it will still trigger questions. It will still trigger questions on the decisions that it will make. And I think any person still can be able to rise up and say that you do not have quorum to do anything that you're doing, even for the coming election. So it is something that the commission must be ready to defend at any given time moving forward. And I think that maybe considering that even within certain political quarters, there are some political quarters that already began discussions around that, and that those kind of discussions are likely to even accelerate certain people to go to court to seek further interpretation or as to whether the commission is in good shape to carry out its activities. I think we have to admit something, that any constitutional making is political. And whichever the case, we will never escape politics from any constitution making. The processes is here and there, they have to be followed. But then I think that when we want to bring aspects of whether any constitution is really for the people or not, it is a very tough balance. It's a very tough balance, because any constitution around the world, whether it is one that really resonates with the people or not, it must seek buy-in from the political class. A must. So it means there has to be political trade-offs. And I think that even as we move forward, you will still realize that in as long as we do not have a strongly engaged populace, and I'm raising this because there has been a lot of discussions around, the BBI was not really a people document and things like that. In as long as we do not have a strong civic populace who is well educated about their responsibility to take the role of driving certain constitutional change beyond what the politicians need, the political class will still take the advantage. And I think this is something that we must appreciate. The Constitution of 2010, in as much as it was something that was, people were clamoring for change, there was a lot of interest for devolution, the trade-offs of the politics was huge. was huge. You know, when the counties came, initially, you remember, we only had 8 regions. But the trade-off of the counties was hugely a political thing. And it was actually a game of, you know, it was internally within the boardroom, it was actually a game between them and us. So, for me, I think when I look at this whole process, what the courts have actually made this country to understand is that any constitutional amendment that this country will want to do moving forward, or anything that relates not necessarily the constitutional amendments. You look at in 2017, the ruling that was done for the presidential election, it was still the process. So I think there is a strong voice that is coming from the judiciary that this country must begin to follow due process in everything that we are doing. And so even the commission, the Independent and Boundaries Commission, must put its act together right from the beginning. That whatever they are doing, even as they move towards the presidential and the general election next year, everything must be seamless to the extent that if anybody goes to court to challenge the results of that election, they should be able to defend themselves to defend themselves to the letter without portraying too much of, the kind of things that we have seen in this BBI and even in the presidential election of 2017.
Just before you go, maybe I need to add something on whether someone again can go to court. Remember, one of the orders that the Court of Appeal and even the High Court gave is that a president can be civil proceedings can be initiated against the president while still in the office for anything done or not done under the Constitution. So if someone goes to court and say, look, IBC has been found to be without proper quorum, and I seek the orders that anything that was done by IBC, especially policy issues, should be annulled, then the issue that I ask myself is, those things that have been done by IBC, where a lot of resources have been spent, who bears? That's public money, isn't it? Who bears? Who should bring back the public funds that have been spent or that have been used on what will be then illegal process or illegal activities? My answer will be, because it's the president. I say it's the president because the law says he ought to have declared vacancy within 7 days. He did not do it. Then that's another avenue. Then one would say, because the court now allowed me to institute civil proceedings against you, then I'm now suing you because you refused to undertake a legal duty that was incumbent upon you, for him then to ensure all the resources that were spent on the so-called illegal process will be refunded to the public.
Of course, Council, you wanted to add something on IEBC. Of course, looking at even the elections have been challenged, and IEBC always is a respondent in court when it comes to these matters. How can they dust themselves up? At least we are sure that now we have commissioners who just need to be vetted and gazetted and sworn in, so that they be well constituted, just as High Court and the Court of Appeal judged.
Maybe 2 issues here. First of all, on the issue of quorum of IBC, this was actually one of the key areas that was raised by a colleague that I had the privilege to work with, Mr. Marara Moke, and his petition in the High Court, petition E416 of 2020, was actually the main that raised issues relating to quorum. And I could say, like, on the night that the High Court issued the judgment, the High Court judgment, IBC sought actually like an interim relief to be given the mandate to continue conducting by-elections. And the court to that extent actually was lenient, and it allowed IBC to continue conducting by-election. To that extent, and both in the High Court judgment and the Court of Appeal, it was never dealt, the issue of by-election was never dealt as a policy issue. The main issue that came out as policy issues was the issue of verification, and that actually required the IBC to be queried before they could sit and consider. But looking at what the role of IBC actually is in by-elections is, there are arguments that this is actually a function that could be undertaken as well by the Secretariat. It's more of an administrative function. To that extent, maybe then challenging that is neither here nor there, but also I'm looking at the time implications that we are just like less than a year to the general election. And of course, you know how, as in litigious we are, whether based on the financial implication, I would really want to challenge that, and will I have my day in court? And so I think it's a very practical, because there is also the aspect of public interest, even by judges, in deciding such issues. So for me, I don't think it's really a direct issue that one will get a relief that they're entitled. But let me come on the issue of public funds. This issue was actually still raised by Morara Omoke in a cross appeal that was filed at the Court of Appeal. And the Constitution, actually under Article 226, sub-Article 5, gives a fiduciary duty to public officials that they must, at all times during their tenure in office, ensure that funds are utilized within the legal, as in principles of the Constitution, and that one can actually be made to pay for those funds even after they exit office. There wasn't no doubt that the process was declared illegally and taxpayers' money were expended. Though the cross appeal was dismissed by the Court of Appeal, and I think that among the 7 judges, only the President of the Court of Appeal dealt with the issue that were raised in the cross appeal of refund of public funds. Yes. In any, maybe if they were bold enough, there isn't nothing in the law that really prohibits them from making such an order that the President and other officials could actually refund the public funds. I think it was a misstep on their part, or they were not bold enough on that issue. But there are debates that it could actually be revived as an independent suit to pursue refund of that money that was expended in the illegal process. Indeed. But otherwise, the law gives that duty, and you could actually be made to refund. But I think we'll await maybe audit of those funds by the Auditor General to see whether that could be up, because going even on the High Court judgment, it was not considered on very, very small technical grounds. Like, for example, was the evidence that you furnished that there was indeed money that was expended, because, you know, when you go to court, you don't assume that a judge knows, though they are in that society and they know what's happening, you can't assume that they will think for you. You must argue your case, table concrete evidence that money was used. But I think it was still a weak. Judges should have been bold enough and made that declaration, at least declare that money was expended in the legal process and can be refunded. They could have made that declaration. But let me just go on the issue of that Churchill raised, that referring to past constitutional amendment processes. You remember that there are very good initiatives like the Punguza Mzigo. That
and before, because we're going to be looking at the cost, of course, the court did talk about it, the money was not going to benefit anyone. It was for a project that would have helped all Kenyans, so nobody was actually benefiting from that. We're going to the cost. We're going to touch on that, because despite the fact that they talked about not going to surcharge the BBI proponents on that, of course, there are appeals. There's a litigant who talked about going to court to challenge that decision, and of course we're going to touch on that. And of course the sweeteners, the sweeteners that you're talking about, because they have a legal implication, the expanded executive. But before then, also in Mombasa, let's have a feel of how they received the BBI judgment. I'm now joined by my colleague Njue Karisa. Good morning, Njue. Kindly bring us up to speed with what the coast has to offer when it comes to the judgment.
Good morning, Ben Njue, Mombasa, where today I'll be speaking to Professor Mwakimaku and of course Beatrice Gambo. She is a former director of the Coast Development Authority and also the coordinator of Jubilee, just to give us some insight of the feel of BBI. Just to bring you up to speed is that as you are aware, during the public participation, most of the county assembly passed the BBI process at that particular level, meaning many of them were for this particular process. Other than the expansion of the executive, as well as the additional constituencies that are going to be added if the BBI was to pass, this particular region feels that the political and economic development that was going to be achieved when this particular process was going to be passed was going to be massive. And of course they felt that the resources that was going to trickle down after this process had passed was going to be massive for this particular region. Let me bring in Professor Mwakimaku just to break it down on the feel of this particular region. Were they expecting the judgment, and after the judgment, how have they received some of this, the ruling that was passed just a few days ago? Karibu sana, bring us to speed. What is the feel on the ground on this particular ruling that was delivered?
Thank you very much. I think from the beginning, the BBI process, there was mixed reactions. There were people who are in favor, and there are others who are not in favor. So obviously, even with the judgment, it is the same. Those who are in favor feel that they're happy. Those who are not in favor felt that they're not very happy with the judgment. But the bottom line is that the BBI process, for those who are in favor of it, they felt that it was going to bring in a lot of development because it was one way in which devolution would have been strengthened. More resources would have been sent to the grassroots, and people would have the opportunity to see more development projects. So basically for those kinds of people, they feel that somehow development will be undermined. Devolution would still also be undermined. But there are those who are against, and these who are particularly felt that the process which was undertaken was not legal. And they feel that the courts have tried to correct something. But all in all, I think we need to take the positives out of this judgment and learn from the negatives out of this judgment. If we want to strengthen devolution, we need to find better ways to do that, because along the coast, I think if devolution is strengthened, many people would benefit. For the areas that people felt that it was unnecessary, for example, the expansion of the executive, we need to find a way in which we could resolve the challenge that we have, because ideally what was being addressed was the perennial fighting after every election, because some leaders felt that they were left out and they need to find room. So we need to find ways in which we could address this challenge, because as we move towards the next election, let's not find ourselves in a situation where people lose and they feel left out and they continuously agitate, they continuously deny, refuse to recognize the leaders that have been elected. So we still have challenges, and we need to find a way in which we can address those challenges irrespective of the outcome of the court decision. Yeah.
Just to engage Beatrice, are you in support of what Professor is saying? Who would the BBI process expand this particular region? And I understand that the process to achieve the constitutional amendment was the one that was unconstitutional. If today someone else was to come up from the Mwananchi and bring up this particular process, do you feel that the region still would have been for the BBI amendment process?
Thank you very much, June. I would like to just go back to history. In 1963, 1964, there was a very, very strong conversation that was happening in the country. And at the coast, the person who was leading this particular process was the late Ronald Ngala. And Ronald Ngala he was voicing up the need to have Majimboism, to have the Majimbo government, because he felt that coast the cry that coast has been marginalized will be addressed through that particular governance process. So fast forward 2010, when we were campaigning for this constitution, the narrative, okay, or the message that we are sending to our people at the coast is that now we have an opportunity to have that which the late Ronan Ngala was crying about, Majimbo ya Ngala, if I may say that in Kiswahili, and people understood, they resonated with it. In fact, if you look at the statistics, there was a 72.2% voter turnout in the country. 69.9% voted, 69.9% voted yes for the constitution, 30% voted no, and of course there were some who were undecided. Now, what that tells you is that the cost, in fact, that the constitution that we are enjoying right now was voted yes overwhelmingly by the people at the coast. Why? Because they understood that as we devolve government, then we'll have an opportunity to bring the resources closer to the people. Now, on 20th August 2021, everybody was glued to the TV, and after the judgment, the social media platforms went ablaze, people celebrating, and I was going through some of these platforms and I was taken aback. I was like, do people really understand what this means to the coastal people? Now, briefly, in the amendment, okay, that was being brought forward through the BBI, an amendment. We were not overhauling the entire constitution. We were amending certain parts, because when you implement a constitution for 10 years, you have an opportunity. You have actually understood the gaps. Okay, you've seen the gaps, and you have a solution to bridge those gaps, so that it can even be a better document for the people. And I tell people, unlike the Bible, the Quran, you cannot amend. But the Constitution, it is a document made by the human mind, meaning that they always has to be room for improvement. There will always be room for change. So this is the opportunity that the BBI was presenting to the Kenyan people, especially now that I'm talking about the coastal people. Now, through the Constitution amendment, okay, the BBI, we were going to increase the allocation of revenue from the national government. Exactly what Ronan Ngala was talking about. Exactly what the late Karisa Maitha was talking about. So that from 15%, now we're going to enjoy 35%. Today, if you go to our counties in costs, it's not perfect, the development that has come, but it is worth to comment that now people are enjoying certain benefits that they did not when we were not operating a devolved function. So 35% would have meant more hospitals. It will have meant better infrastructure. It will have meant more children getting, to go to school, better schools. It will have meant more, job creation. There was so much that we are going to enjoy as the coast. In fact, the narrative that coast has been marginalized has faded off. Okay, it has continually faded off in these 10 years that we have been in the devolved, governance. Okay, so for me, I actually felt, taken aback, because I was like, wow, we had this opportunity for us to get more. Okay, as the coastal community. So I believe we still, have you seen, there's still, the Council of Governors did a press conference yesterday, and they said we will try and get this allocation, okay, that we were talking about in the BBI through Parliament, okay, to see how they can be able to adopt this, and the bill goes through, and then it is signed into law. So those processes, for me, I actually commend them, okay, because it is good for the coastal people. It is very good for our people.
Okay. On that particular note, now that the court ruled this particular process unconstitutional, the Parliament has decided that it will take just some of the particular vipengele tu fulani, so that they can be able to table it and see if they can pass it before the general election. And that is what also the Council of Governors is doing during this period before the general election. Do you think it will work?
It should work because Parliament has that responsibility to bring about changes in society and to provide direction where how things need to be done. But my perspective is that the years that we have been engaging in this BBI, this was a lost opportunity. a lost opportunity in the sense that if you want to do something that is good for the nation, you also need to recognize that it has to be done within the confines of the Constitution. So we have wasted almost 2-3 years of haggling about BBI, and then all of a sudden it has become unconstitutional because of the intransigence of the people who are behind this process. Because these issues were raised before, that look, let us look at what the Constitution says and let us do these changes in regard to the Constitution. And people just didn't want to listen. Now, this is a lost opportunity. We have wasted a lot of time. And now Parliament all of a sudden realizes that, oh, maybe we could have done it this way. And you know what the problem is? Is that our politics is done according to the wishes of a few individuals. And the courts have told us and told everybody that that is not the right way to go about doing changes in Kenya. Kenyans yearn for change. Kenyans want to ensure that there is development. Kenyans want to ensure that devolution is properly done. But it has to be done according to the Constitution of Kenya.
Briefly, just before we wind up, your last and final take. Will this work? Will this process work as it goes to Parliament and, of course, the Council of Governors' efforts so that they can bring some of this vipengele back to the people?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to work. It's going to work because the Constitution, the 2010, the Constitution that we enjoy right now, is very clear on what can be done in Parliament and what cannot be done in Parliament. And I know in Parliament we have members of Parliament, they are very alive to this fact. So they are going to look into what they can amend so that it sails through. And trust me, no member of Parliament is going to fight, okay, a bill that is placed before the House telling us that we are going to increase revenue allocation. And this is something that is going to be pushed by the governors. So yes, this is going to work. And when it comes to Mashinani, we are going to push and we are going to support. We are going to lobby our members of Parliament so that this goes into law. Thank you.
All right, Njue, those were very, very insightful remarks from Professor Hassan Mwakimako and, of course, Beatrice Gamba on the perspective on the BBI. They say it is a lost chance, a lost opportunity for this particular region to develop politically and economically. They are hopeful that, of course, the some of the strides that the parliamentarians are doing and, of course, the Council of Governors are doing could help them achieve what this particular region was yearning for. So, of course, we are continuing in this particular discussion, but I'm handing it back to you, Njue, so that you can continue with the discussion in studio.
Indeed, thank you so much. That has been our reporter, Njue Karisa from the Pwani University. They're engaging some experts on the BBI judgment. And of course, they have rightfully put it that it was a good idea, but the process was wrong, and especially touching on some issues. Those that need amendment via Parliament should have been taken to Parliament and then follow the law in initiating the popular initiative according to Article 257 of the Constitution. Indeed, and also we had been talking about IEBC. When we come back, we're taking a short break. You do remember today is when the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs are actually vetting the 4 names that were forwarded for the IEBC commissioners. We have Juliana Huonge Sherera, Francis Madenge Wanderi, Irene Cherop Masit, Justus Abonyo Nyang'ao. They are being vetted by the Parliamentary Committee, and when we come back, we'll be heading there to hear what is going on there. We are coming back after this short break.
Kwa hakika ule uamuzi niliochukua kumhusu Badi ulikuwa wa makosa. Najutia kusema la kweli. Haukuwa uamuzi wa busara kabisa.
Tulimalizana mimi na wewe. Sawa. Na sijui kwa nini nifuata hapa.
Nataka kukushukuru kwa kunirudishia sauti yangu.
Ni vizuri mtu kuchukua muda na kufikiria mambo kwa makini.
Wewe, nilikuleta hapa kuja kufanya nini?
Yaani ya maneno ya kujirudia. What type of nonsense is this?
Quiero amarte de una forma diferente, de otro modo.
I used to give my support to Madame Lucrezia because she's the mother of Lucio. Now I know that Lucio is very lucky to have you.
But hey, at least all your land is mine now. Let's talk to my lawyer and finish this.
No, not so fast. You're going to have to get Max out of jail, and then I will give you my land.
You always think about others before yourself. And I'm really sorry, but I really think that Mr. Mauro is already dead. It's been weeks since he disappeared.
Why are you here in the office of my father?
I am the president of this company now. Did you forget that?
I've decided to give Cesar the Star Zone in exchange for your freedom. You're gonna get out of here soon, Max.
Quiero amarte, adorarte, idolatrarte, de una forma diferente, de otro modo, nunca igual al de otra gente, respetando tu...
Welcome back. This is KBC and this is KBC News Check on the second hour. My name is Njue and Anna Wangeshi is helping us with the sign language interpretation. We still have the experts that we have. Of course, we have Kanso Wesonga here. We have Dr. Churchill, Saoke, and of course, we have Topua, who are helping us delve much deeper into the BBI judgment and what options do we have. And in this second hour, we're also going to put in the political aspects so that we may know what next for the proponents and also for us as Kenyans. And as I had alluded to earlier, is that the vetting for the 4 names who were forwarded to Parliament in relation to the IEBC commissioners are currently underway, and Madam Juliana Cherera is currently being vetted by the committee in Parliament. But before then, perhaps we can just kind of a recap of what our experts were talking about. A good idea, but the wrong process. If we decide, of course, the Right Honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga did say we are going to explore other options. The Supreme Court is not an option. IEBC, they did talk about making an appeal, and also the other interested parties might decide to go to the Supreme Court. But what options do they have if they decided, because they still have that option, to appeal at the Supreme Court?
Well, I think, in my opinion, I think it will still be important to have appeals in the Supreme Court for purposes of interpretation of certain segments of the rulings, for the interest of future proposals to amendment to the Constitution. And I think that it will be too much to call to think that the Supreme Court is likely to alter the decisions of the lower court, especially being that some of the issues raised were very weighty, and the decisions were anchored on very strong cases. So it will be too much to expect the Supreme Court to annul the decision. But I think it will be much more objective to find ways of interpreting for the purposes of making future constitutional, so that some of these constitutional processes can be, they can be clarified, and like the issues around the issues around the basic structure, the basic structure doctrine. There were schools of thought that were claiming, Kenya is a common law system. Does the doctrine of the basic structure, does it apply to us? So there are some of those. There are more scholarly thinking, which it will be good for some interest parties, the IBC. It will also be important for them maybe to have certain defend themselves, because they are going to be on the receiving end from some of the issues that we have raised here, which are policy issues, which can actually make them vulnerable on some of the activities, the decisions that they have made for the past 4 or so years. So I think based on that, then I think those are the options that are available, but not to annul the decision, to have the referendum take place as it had already been scheduled.
At least 5 judges from the High Court and now 7 judges from the Court of Appeal. Actually, as you rightfully put it, is that we'll be really stretching it up. But Wesonga, they still have that option of appealing. They can even appeal some of the decisions, not entirely. Looking forward to having the Supreme Court annul what the Court of Appeal had brought in. But also Professor Hassan did talk about the proponents. They just did really push to the limits things like the boundaries of which are mandated by the IEBC. Do you have to say that?
Yes, I think I agree with my friend Churchill to the extent that there are some portions of the judgment. Personally, I would want a further interpretation, and the issue is when it comes to referendum, and there are several issues being raised in a proposal to change the constitution. Should we have multiple choices so that when I cast my vote to yes, is it yes to all the questions, or is it yes to one question and not to another question? Just like if you get to your house and you find your son somewhere and you ask several questions without giving your son time to respond, like, did you eat? Did you say hi to your mommy when you came back? Did you wash your face? Did you blah blah blah? Those are about 5 questions. What do you take when your son says yes? Is it yes to what question? I think that's some portion of the judgment. Personally, I would want a further interpretation by the Supreme Court for future use, not necessarily for this BBI proposed amendment to the Constitution. But of course, as Churchill has put it right, that now we have about 12 judges who have made finding about either illegality on one issue or the other. It will be a tall order for the Supreme Court to, set aside all the judgment on all issues, and so allow the BBI process to go on.
Indeed, and of course we're going to be revisiting that, but we now want to cross over to the County Hall, where Madam Julian Cherera is being vetted by the Parliamentary Committee in regards to IEBC. But allow me to appreciate Zekie Zextet, Danny, you're saying you're locked. BBI is a Kenyan past. Diana Kolond, you're saying BBI was a political conmanship and betrayal. And they say they reject it as well. But of course, we will be sampling more of your responses. Caroline Otieno, you're also watching live from Nairobi. Let's first of all cross over and hear what the vetting is all about.
Were not done. I think those are the gaps that are there in the commission. So upon being given this job, we will do it. We will fast track I said that I am trained to do a result management offices. These are the things that need to be fast-tracked so that now in the next, after 5 years, we won't have such gaps that are legally binding. The question about quorum and the ruling that just happened, yes, we are going to review the things that have been agreed by the commissioners that have been there. Everything we will want them to put on the table so that now we can get back to them and revisit every decision that has been made, and more so the decisions that are going to affect this current election has to be done by the full quorum so that we don't give a gap that come elections and the results are announced, we are revisited with this question back there. So I will propose that everything that concerns the urgent need of this general election is brought on the table and discussed and agreed amongst the 7 commissioners that will be appointed.
Very well. Yeah, very well. There's a question that she never answered. Yes. About technology. It's been the weakest point when it comes to resource transmission. Now that she has a background in IT, what does she intend to do so that these issues don't keep on cropping up time and again? And number 2, about enabling the diaspora votes to be counted during the national election. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me correct, I don't have a background in ICT. My background is education and management. The ICT is the basic ICT that we know that helps any manager to do operations. Yes, not the technical aspect of ICT. Diaspora voters, yes, it is their fundamental right that they should be given the opportunity to vote, and we will endeavor to ensure that they will participate in these elections. And this is a continuous process so that continuously we built up on our database on the diaspora voters, that they are continually registered as voters and continually we clean up the register. So that is what I will propose.
Very well. Now, yes, taken a bit of your time, but let me make 2 comments before we release you. Now, or in the event that you are taken on board, do you think this country, in matters elections, do you think this country require or need a law to regulate campaigns, in the sense that we have an unchecked cycle of being in campaign mood from year to year, that we need a restriction, timelines, say 3 months, 1 month for a particular election before you mount a potential candidate mounting a campaign that may go to certify the economy, daily life of the people, right? And restrict it to a particular timeline. Secondly, with the Huduma number, do you think it would be possible to eliminate voter registration, voter register, that a Kenyan just walks in with a Huduma number and votes without the meandering, going through the process of voter register, because the Constitution says a Kenyan citizen is entitled to vote. Don't you think there may be a time when the voter register becomes paperless, that you only need a Huduma number to walk into a voting station and vote?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I support that there is need to regulate the campaigns and the timing, and so that our socio-economic environments are not interfered with. So, yes, we should have a regulation that will bar people from misbehaving and tampering with our norm during election period, and especially when the time of campaigns come. For the Huduma number to be used as the voter's card, yes, to make work easy. Once you are registered and you have your Huduma number, yes, I'm looking forward to that time that we can just use that. And because you're above 18 and it is your right to vote, when you appear, you can vote. And it should be so connected that you cannot go and vote in another polling station.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I think any other concern? Okay, Juliana, we congratulate you again and wish you well. We will consider all the matters that relate to you with our vetting, and to see whether we will approve you. Members will deliberate on you. You are very progressive ideas. I wish you luck and hope you also move away from Mombasa. Realize you are going to be a Kenyan in totality. And of course you are become an ambassador for the Coast region. Thank you very much. You are released now.
Thank you, Chair.
That is the first candidate of the 4 proposed to take up the vacant IEBC commissioner's post, Madam Juliana Cherera there. And gentlemen, perhaps we can first of all delve with matters IEBC there. She's talked about something that had been proposed by one of the candidates during the interviews, where they're talking about when you're picking your ID, you be registered as a voter there and then, so that we don't have to register again. Perhaps you can change your where you want to vote from, but you get your ID and your voter card there and then. Churchill, your take on that?
Well,
perhaps it can even help in the cost.
Well, it will, of course, cascading the voter registration processes, if it is anchored on law, will be good. The issues is around integrity of the data. I think that is something that really needs to be thought through, because we are dealing with extremely tech-savvy generation, and you know, the data integrity will be something that will be very key. And considering the political interest around the voters, and you know, the voting and the votes, is something that really has to really be thought through. Otherwise, continuous voter registration is something that is very progressive. Of course, there will have to be certain, you know, there has to be certain laws that will have to be put in place to safeguard that kind of process or that kind of procedure. That being so, it being legal, the question of integrity of the data is something that will be very significant moving forward. Yeah.
Yes, and Pua, you can dig in that, because she has talked about regulations to stop people tampering with elections. Do we need some more legislation on the same, or we have airtight laws? It's just that the implementation is something else.
I think the question of implementation is actually our main undoing. And just commenting on the issue of Huduma process, the general Mwananchi have been skeptical about how the whole process was undertaken, and not really many people understand what end or gain is it supposed to achieve. And you remember that the issue of elections integrity is a very, very emotive issue in Kenya. And you remember that just before the 2017 general election, because of the lapses in our system, court actually said that let polling results at the polling stations be final. And I think because all parties are skeptical to technology, and you remember that even our courts made judicial notice that indeed technology actually can fail. I don't know if it's made to deliberately fail or the failure is inadvertent. But I think the main what maybe different political parties can do is actually, apart from just maybe having their own tallying centers or even relying on technology, is deploy enough party agents at the polling stations to ensure that all the results, for example, that are transmitted through the KIMS kit tally with what is at the polling station, because you've had maybe allegations that system is hacked and results are changed and tampered. So I think that check at the polling station for me is actually the most trustworthy, because you have the form, you have your agent taking the signed form by the agents. But just maybe also taking a shot on there's another issue that you've raised on the issue of registration of voters.
Yes.
And this was actually one of the issues in the BBI, that IBC has not been registering voters.
Yes.
And they could actually adduce evidence to show that indeed continuous voter registration has been taking place. So the Huduma number cannot still be an alternative to the continuous voter registration, because you know that we have actually one of the issues that IBC actually has to deal with is cleaning up the voter register. You've had allegations of dead people
voting,
resurrecting and voting.
Yes.
So I think Huduma number cannot be an alternative. IBC must be on their toes and continuously do this. As time evolves, we have a generation of young people turning 18 and being eligible to be registered.
Yes.
It as in to be able to coordinate and ensure that everything is right, the process must continuously be undertaken.
Indeed. And that is something that also came up during the judgment, when they talked about IBC did not carry out mass continuous voter registration. And she has also talked about regulations to stop people tampering with the register or even election. Do you believe, as Tupua said, about the legislation that we have, is the implementation that is a problem?
I agree with my friend Mr. Tupua that we have, I think, sufficient law or regulation, and we do not need additional regulations. All we need to do is to implement whatever is existing. The multiplicity of the laws that we may generate may make it even difficult for the state agents to implement. Let us implement what's there, and I have participated in election petitions, and I know in every aspect of that may bring any dispute in election petition, it's covered by the regulations, it's covered by the act, and it's covered by the constitution. So I don't think we need more regulation. That will be over-regulation. We just need full implementation of what already exists. Just to put a point on whether we should register when you're collecting a copy of, your ID, I think that's a noble idea, and I agree with Churchill. It's subject to, integrity of the data that will then be collected at that time. Remember, one of the interviewees for the IBC position, I think it was Madam Florence Jaoko. She said she had registered as a voter, but when she went to cast the vote, I think at St. George's Primary, she found that her name was not in the register. Those are the issues that IBC has to ensure that they are properly handled, and any person who registers, the details, data is protected, and the integrity thereof is not in question. Yes.
Churchill, looking at IEBC again, every time we go to an election, there are always challenges, and of course it narrows down to IBC did this, IBC didn't do this, and it's election right here in the country. The diaspora, they're coming out very strongly saying that we also want to exercise our democratic right. Now, if we have issues right here in the country when it comes to election matters, what about for the diaspora? A lot of questions. Is this the time that IBC should come out strongly and be counted when it comes to the diasporas voting in this coming election? Will that increase their threshold in terms of integrity?
Well, I think that it is, in principle, I think it is important to appreciate that, the reason why you know, politicians, let me give the context. Politicians will do their politics to win elections. And they will want to do anything to ensure that that election is won from whichever, irrespective whether it means violating laws or rules or whatever, they want to ascend to power. And the reason we have institutions is to ensure that the institutions safeguard the constitution of the land to the extent that whoever ascends to power ascends as per the law. And I think this is the reason why the Independent and Boundaries Commission is there, to ensure that people who ascend to power through the right means as per laid down by the law. Now, it is therefore incumbent on them to put in place the right processes and the right interventions that will ensure that that particular obligation is safeguarded, be it within the territorials of Kenya or without. So, in as much as we are requiring the IBC to oversee its mandate, constitutional mandate of giving a free, fair and verifiable elections in Kenya, it means that the votes that the voters or the people who will be voting from the diaspora, those votes must also be as per the free, fair and verifiable. So it is incumbent on them to put in place systems that safeguards the voting within the territory of the Republic of Kenya and those that associated in terms of the voters that are in the diaspora, because you see it is within the constitution that, you know, the Kenyans in diaspora are also eligible to vote, and if they do not put in place proper measures to safeguard those votes, the politicians will do what they want, what they do best, seeking loopholes to get those votes to win the election. So they have to really up their game to safeguard the votes, and not just to safeguard the votes for specific personalities, but to safeguard the votes for the purpose of ensuring that they stand as per the obligation that is given to them by the Constitution.
Indeed, and perhaps because we have to go back to the IBC vetting, perhaps you can touch on as we wrap up so that we may head there. And looking at what Cherera has talked about, use of technology to ensure that diaspora get their constitutional right to vote. Remember, they can never be overlooked, becoming the #1 in terms of remittances in the country. How do IBC ensure that these guys, the diaspora vote, is counted as well?
Yeah, I think the diaspora in any country, not only Kenya, is very important. And I think that they've been actually, like, say, just like the media, they've been part of the fourth estate. They're so much concerned of what is happening at home, and they're always looking that the best be done and the law followed. And I must even say that during the BBI, I think the diaspora also played a very great role in seeing that the whole challenge before our court, as in the court system, is done. And I think the embassies and the high commissions in different countries have a great role, because I think they are the main linkage between the diaspora and now the country, in making sure that all these people are registered. And I think even it may be the high time that we may even as a country also illuminate on the issue of early voting. We've seen it happening in other countries, and perhaps maybe this could be implemented in respect of the diaspora, because of the different timings of between now, for example, Kenya and this person in the United States. I think this actually could, IBC could revamp this, and this time around, as in, and you remember that the late Chris Musando was, I think, in charge of IBC technical aspect of technology, had, as in, a lot of confidence in the system happening that time round, but sadly enough, as in, he was killed. And I think our main undoing really lies in the issue of technology. And of course, most of the current commissioners who are undergoing vetting, you'd see that I think very few of them still have experience with the issue of technology. And so it may be a situation where you are really depending on the technical guys who are not really maybe accountable to make sure that systems are working. So I think it's high time that even commissioners must be held accountable of whatever lapses happen in the system. Anytime before elections, IBC presents budgetary estimates, which, unlike, for example, is organs like the judiciary, their budget is past 100%. So I think in terms of the support, they've been given the support. We've just seen that they've started the issue of procurement. There have been late procurements or even single sourcing of equipment. These are some of the things that must be ensured that they are done at the right time. Last time, the main, as in the guy who won the tender, was actually, the tender was challenged in court. Mm-hmm. We hope that IBC just puts the house in order, and let's not go back to where we are arguing of they've not done this right, they've done this wrong. Let them put their best foot forward, because I think they've been given the necessary support they need. It's only for them to unveil and do the dry runs way before the elections to ensure that all systems. I personally, for example, have served as a presiding officer. I'm given this satellite phone, but I send tallies, results tallies, for example, presidential election, in a remote part, for example, of Kajiado, but I come to the National Tallying Center before even the results themselves, which I had sent, have been received. So you could see that why is there that lag in transmission of results? It must be a deliberate, and we must work towards that.
Indeed. And perhaps your final words on IEBC and ensuring even those in the diaspora vote counts and there are no integrity issues raised.
I think IBC has a very big role here to ensure that every other person who is a registered voter has the opportunity to cast the vote, because everyone's vote must count in any election and even in the coming general elections. So it is, I think in 2013 and even in 2017, there were some people who are in diaspora who participated in the election. But I think there are also others who experience difficulties or challenges in casting their vote. IBC should then put into place some measures that will ensure that any person who is in diaspora, just like any Kenyan who is in Kenya, have equal opportunity to cast their votes as by the law provided.
Indeed. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Of course, we have to go to County Hall for that vetting exercise, but we have been with these three gentlemen here. On my right, we had Edmund, who is an advocate of the High Court, Dr. Churchill Saoke, who is governance and leadership expert and also a lecturer at the JKUAT University. And of course, we have Tupua Lesinko, quite a name indeed, who is also an advocate of the High Court. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Bentro Njue. Anwangeshi, who has been our sign language interpreter, and we are now crossing over to hear Francis Madenge Wanderi, who is being vetted by the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs. Thank you so much for watching.
Done properly is done. So I have the organizational capacity, I have the experience in campaigns, I will be able to deliver that to the IBC. Thank you. The other one about the last election, some commissioners leaving the country. I think I'm patriotic enough. I consider the departure referred to by honorable member as cowardice, and I think those of us who love this nation should be here, sort out our problems here instead of going to shout about our problems elsewhere. So my view is that I'm patriotic, and I would consider that kind of act as not quite patriotic. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Mheshimiwa Njue. What is your question first? About it?
Thank you, Chair. So, as Kenyans, we do appreciate the fact that our IBC is seemingly looking transparent,
particularly when it comes to having our votes counted in the voting centers, polling centers. However, we've had problems with transmission in this republic. In that light, what is your view on Kenyans or candidates in particular having their tallying centers, their own tallying centers, and the media, because we have a media that has straightened things. What is your view on the media having their own tallying center rather than waiting for the main tallying, IBC tallying center to give us results? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to say first, congratulations for your nomination and coming this far in the process. One, I just wanted to ask, I don't know if I missed it maybe, what kind of businesses are you engaged in? And secondly, after IEBC approved the BBI signature, some Kenyans argued that it was erroneous because IEBC didn't have a physical register of signatures. Do you think IEBC can maintain a signature of registers or have one? And if so, how can IEBC go about it?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Wanderi, I have two brief questions. One, from your CV, you've been a consultant for many companies. You've also indicated right now you're still a management consultant, and you're also in private businesses. My understanding of the role of a commissioner of IEBC is a full-time engagement. How do you intend to manage the businesses that you've been running while still running? If you succeed for approval, for appointment, how will you manage the two? Number two, there are numerous spoiled votes in every election. Does it worry you as it does worry me? And if you qualify for, if you are approved by Parliament for appointment for the position of a commissioner, what will you do to reduce the number of votes that are usually spoiled in every election, which run into hundreds of thousands at the national level? Thank you.
You have Kaluma. Mheshimiwa Kaluma, do you have any question? Mheshimiwa Kaluma on the ring. Very well. Answer this question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair and the honorable members. I will start with the last question about the spoiled votes. I have held the view that the cause of the spoiled votes is mostly has to do with the level of voter education and civic education that the Kenyans get. And one of the mandates of IEBC is to ensure that there's proper voter education. And IEBC using the partners, because there are very many people who would be willing, stakeholders who would be willing to work with IEBC, including organizations like the churches and what have you, should undertake. And I intend that if I am appointed to IEBC, I will do my best to ensure that we have voter education that the voter to be able to understand where and how to put the mark. I don't think there is anybody who comes from his house to come and spoil a vote. So they do so because they do not know. So that ignorance has to be breached, and that's the responsibility of IBC. The other one about managing the various jobs. I am a director in a company called Roots Credit Limited. It's not a full-time job, so that we will learn because we have other directors. And my consultancy, I would wish to currently stop because the job of IBC is enormous, and it is important to focus on it without other distractions. I wish to state that to this committee. And that has to do also with the question that the honorable members asked about my businesses I'm engaged in. Now, about the signatures which the honorable member has asked, right now, you are identified through your tab. So the issue of signatures, because of technology, is going to be obsolete. So there's probably, we have to follow the law as it is now, and using technology, see which areas we need to adjust so that we can make any engagement of identifying the people who have supported or registered using the technology. And I think that is the way to go. That's the way the world is going, and that would be the best way to look at that. On the issue of tallying centers, I think the law is clear that it's only an IBC that can have a tallying center. And as we execute the mandate which would be given when we are appointed, we would want to follow the law to the letter. And if there are any changes in terms of that law, this committee and the honorable members will be coming to you to ask to change the law where it needs to be changed for any particular reason. So I would want to see a very close working relationship between IBC and this committee in terms of developing laws that are going to guide this nation forward in elections. In terms of transmission of results, I would expect probably learning from what we saw last time and the failures that we saw last time. I would expect probably by now IBC has already identified the weakness in terms of technology and have developed ways of sorting it out. If they have not, probably that would be one of the first assignments that we must undertake, because technology can fail, but then if it fails, what are the provisions? And that provisions, they have to be within the law. So I'm looking at it from a point of view that IBC by now must have done that. We have not done. We need to do it as a matter of urgency and as a matter of priority, so that we do not have the kind of thing we saw last time happening again. Thank you, Chair.
All right, I think, do you have any concern?
Yeah, Chair, I want to ask Mr. Wanderi two issues. Number one, Mr. Wanderi, as you are aware, you are joining the IEBC, which has suffered some credibility crisis for some time now, because of the elections that were nullified by the courts, the repeat elections. Some commissioners left office, and they stayed without commissioners for almost 3 years now. What do you think you're going to do differently when you join that commission at this point in time? My second question, which is more important, is as you're aware, there was a ruling of the appeal court 3 days ago, precisely on Friday, I think. And the court found out that IEBC had no quorum and they had no mandate to do any policy work in that commission. what will you do, or what is your view? Will you consider it as an illegality, the work that was done from that time when there was no quorum, in around 2018 April up to today? What is your view about that?
Thank you, Chair and the Honourable Member. Let me start by credibility crisis. It is common knowledge, and it is in all of us that there are issues of credibility at IBC, and particularly arising from last election. One, I hold the view that for IBC to build its credibility, it needs to engage with all the stakeholders. And that includes the political parties and the leaders of the political parties. Because even as we talk about the independence of IBC, it has to take into account that it is not operating as an island. It is operating within a political system and a governance system. And the views that the customers, and I consider the stakeholders, the political parties, the agents of government that work with IBC as the customers, we must, as IBC, be ready to serve them and serve their interest in the best way possible. So for us to build the credibility of IBC, we needed to engage all the stakeholders. That is very, very key as far as I'm concerned. So that is how we do things differently. I do not want to see an IBC that is seen as a policeman for the elections, because that is not the work of IBC. It is okay to deliver the elections, but that is not the only work. That is important. Coming back to your second question about the appeal court ruling, I feel very happy that this ruling was made about IBC. And the reason why I say this is because it now gives us the basis for saying is what has been done by the current commissioners good enough. If I'm appointed, I will ask the members who are there, together with the new members, that we review anything from buying a pin, anything that is related to the coming elections. We must review everything from the beginning and agree on what must be done, and not only done, must be done right. That is my position, and I think I'm sure even the chairman, the current chairman of IBC, would not want to see an election that turns out to be like the one we did last time. No Kenyan, not in the chair, no Kenyan who is in sound mind would an election like the one we saw last time. We would want to do a good process. We take control of us. We agree. And not only the commissioners. I want to imagine that the managers and the secretariat is part of the process. So I'd want to establish a way through which the governance issues that are related to the running of the elections, from the commission to the management, through the committees, everything is under control and properly managed. That is my view. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. Mr. Adel, before we release you, let me make certain comments. Maybe if you are, in case you are approved, then these some areas that of concern that may interest you. One, you may think, or do you think, that voter education and elections should be included in school curriculum? Right, civic education covering elections and voting, perhaps right from the primary school all the way through, should be part of curricula to inculcate some sense of responsibility in terms of voter education. And two, I didn't hear you mention any experience in the area of procurement. But year in, year out, IBC and election bodies have been visited by scandals and some haphazard way of conducting procurements. Maybe that is an area you may comment or consider to improve on. And then there is a comment I made to your colleague who just left. But he may also perhaps comment on it. Kenyans had been bred to a culture that carries elections year to year, day to day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, campaigns. And this statifies economic growth and day-to-day lives of the people, endless campaigns. Do you think steps should be taken to legislate, curtail these against penalties, confine them depending on what type of elections, like bylaws through timeline? You say if it's presidential, you say maybe 3 months before the event, or other elections. I'm just saying this. Do you think it's high time we did this? And lastly, let me perhaps give you a little guidance if you are taken. There is a doctrine, I think lawyers here know it, called estoppel and acquiescence. That if you believe a set scenario is proper in law, if you have a return that it is proper, you cannot just wake up after some prolonged period and then say now this was again improper or illegal, when you have already carried right? You carry your mandate assuming that this is the way and people take it, and then abruptly you come tomorrow capriciously and say you are not a member of this body. And all a while, even in corporate governance, you've been a director throughout, you have made decisions, a member of parliament has legislated, then you come and say, oh, you are not, because of your elections was not properly carried out, or that. Maybe it's called acquiescence or estoppel, in a way which is called upon at times to guide our affairs so that you don't just capriciously disrupt the lives of the people. You may comment on those, you may reserve your comments, put it as your guidelines.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair. Let me start with the last one. And the reason how I want to relate that one to the... The reason why I want to relate that to what Honorable Junet Mohammed had asked about the ruling of the appeal court. I believe in taking responsibility of my actions and the actions that we may do with the committee. So I want to tell this committee that we will take full responsibility and the full credit or otherwise for the action of IBC. Because if we know we are doing the wrong things, then there's no point. So I want to say that we will not run away from decisions. We will not run away from accepting the responsibility for any action we have taken as a committee. I want that kind of understanding to be within IBC commissioners. So that's what about the culture of campaigns. We live in a very interesting country because, like you have rightly put, you find that immediately after the elections, maybe your first year, the second year, there is already campaign for the next election. I think there has to be a way through which that has to be regulated. I honestly believe that, because it disrupts the development, even for members of parliament who are heading their constituencies to implement their projects, even the government for that matter. So I actually think and I believe that should be done. It should be a process, because we have learned lessons from the past. We need to regulate those issues. But one of the other issues, I find that if I go to a Harambee, Mheshimiwa goes to a Harambee and they donate money, people think that is development, because that actually is donation. But the development of the people is much bigger and deeper than that. So we need to protect the development of this nation from that element. And I would support that change. The other one is about the procurement. Kenyan elections are said to be the most expensive in the world. And even you look at the region, it is still very, very, very expensive compared to our neighbors. I have not done procurement, but I believe there is a way of bringing that down. Probably there are many ways, what I say, of killing a cat. We need to analyze where is our election expensive. Is it the printing of the ballots that is very expensive? Is it the ballot paper? It has security features. We are told several security features. As much as we protect the integrity of the election, is it by making that election expensive? Probably that is not the way. Are there other issues surrounding it? So the procurement, and I would want to engage the commissioners and the managers as if I'm appointed, to look at that process from the beginning to the end and see which areas we can reduce the cost. That is key as well. About the voter education.
Be included in the curriculum.
Yes, about the voter education, including in the curriculum. Actually, that would be a very beautiful thing to do. And not only voter education, the values, national values, should be part and parcel of what we should be educating our children. Because I have seen that by the time the students are leaving the school, primary, secondary, they go to university, by the time they are coming out of the university, they probably have no idea about what happened. It is important that we include some of those things in our curriculum very early, and so that we can also have people who are willing to vote and vote for value. So I would support that, and I would really want to work with the curriculum development to see whether it can work. And it can work. Thank you.
Then you don't have to comment on their questions and all that. That is okay. But there is a member, I don't know whether he's interested in any. Kaluma, Mheshimiwa Kaluma, we want to release Mr. Wanderi. Do you have any comment?
Yes, Chair.
Make it quick.
I don't have any question from Wanderi. I wish him well as we consider his nomination.
Okay, thank you.
None at all, Chair. I wish Mr. Wanderi well as we proceed to consider his nomination.
Okay. Bwana Wanderi, all right, we'll release you. our decision, the committee will deliberate on your suitability or otherwise, and communicate the decision to the House. It will be public knowledge when the committee and the House decides on your suitability. Thank you very much for coming.
May I thank all the honorable members for this opportunity. I hope you find me suitable, and we promise to deliver a credible election if I am in the commission. Thank you very much.
Very well. You are free to go. Next. Yeah, we'll try to be as quick as possible. Yes. Who is coming next?
Hakika ule uamuzi niliochukua kumhusu Badi ulikuwa wa makosa. Najutia kusema la kweli. Haukuwa uamuzi wa busara kabisa.